Title of mine is, If the Church Fails to Adapt, Death is Inevitable. I'd like to start by putting a question forth to just the men in this forum who are married or have a girlfriend, and you don't have to participate if this makes you uncomfortable. Could those of you please raise your hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can't raise your hand. Shame on you. All right, so we got 7. Okay, we'll go from there. Now I'm going to quote from a verse in Leviticus, the King James Version, Leviticus 15:19. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she should be put apart 7 days, and whosoever touches her shall be unclean unto the even. Now I'd like to ask the 7 of y'all that just raised your hands, and again, if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to do so. But I'd like to ask that 7 of you, if you isolate your wife or your girlfriend in the backyard and avoid touching her during her menstrual cycle, and raise your hand if this is a common practice. Oh my goodness, I don't see any hands. The reason that I asked this question, I wanted to illustrate that many of us have evolved. And we no longer interpret every word in the scriptures literally. 1 Kings 7:23 through 26 was the starting point for me, where I began to move away from a literal view. The Bible's 30.10 cubits, which numerically represents 3.0, is a much different result than what is now the proven value of pi. To give you some idea of how disastrous it would be for an architect to say build using the Bible's version of pi, Eva Lamb, a writer for Scientific America, in a post entitled, How Much Pi Do You Need?, posited the following. When we round pi to the integer 3, we're about 4.51% off from the correct value. If we use it to estimate the circumference of an object with a diameter of 100 feet, we'll be off by a little over 14 feet. I have on occasion attempted to place myself in the shoes of an architect. One assigned the task of building a Roman emperor's new stadium using the biblical version of pi, and then being forced to explain why there was a 14-foot gap in the end of his stadium. I've always imagined that I turned to the emperor and said, after first crossing my fingers, "Yes, it's a brand new concept, sir. It's called the horseshoe design." Didn't get any laughs on that one. Then I met the conflict which exists between the speed of light and the creation timeline produced by a literal interpretation of the Bible. The closest galaxy to Earth is Andromeda, and it takes roughly 2.5 million years for the light to reach us from that distance. If you were standing outside tonight and the Earth was as old as the literal interpretation suggests, there would be billions of less stars to look at than what you can actually see now, including Andromeda. Stated quite simply, not enough time would have elapsed to allow their light to reach your eye. Those who choose to accept the literal interpretation of the Bible, after being made aware of these two conflicts, they must surely own an indomitable faith. One so strong, they could forever toss apples into the sky and never once see them falling back to earth. If you chose to interview both the victims and a witness to a multi-car accident, it's likely that you would hear 3 different versions of how the accident occurred. With human beings, it is not uncommon to have multiple interpretations. There is, however, only one truth. And truth can be proven conclusively. Christ in Psalm 34:12 through 13 states, "Who is the man who desires life and loves length of days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit." The value of truth is not just extolled by Christ. Modern psychology, as so frequently occurs, walks hand in hand with the teachings of Christ. In August of 2012, the American Psychological Association posted a press release about the research of doctors Anita E. Kelly and Li Jin Wang of Notre Dame. The results dovetail with Psalm 34:12 through 13. I'm going to quote from just a portion of that release. In weeks when participants told fewer lies, they reported that their close personal relationships had improved and that their social interactions overall had gone more smoothly during the week. Statistical analysis showed that this improvement in relationships significantly accounted for the improvement in health that was associated with less lying. Now, this study's not yet completed peer review. However, I doubt there are many or any of you in this audience who would suggest to any layman that lying is a healthy activity. The more you read the teachings of Christ, the more you see his emphasis on telling the truth. Even when presented with an opportunity to spare his life, simply by telling one single lie, he refused to do so, and shortly thereafter was nailed to a cross. I am sure most of you would agree, regardless of whether you accept Christ as the Son of God, that to earnestly follow his teachings is a well-proven path to a healthier and happier life. My concern is that the teachings of Christ might be lost to us because of a close association between his teachings and a literal interpretation of the Bible. Preaching a literal Bible is a deceit. It refuses to acknowledge reality, and by association risks a loss of credibility to the gospel of Christ. Further, it endangers the health and well-being of every living human being. I applaud the Catholic Church for recognizing the true threat of global warming. However, I attend multiple Catholic churches myself, and there is still a significant amount of parishioners that are climate change deniers. A poll conducted by Pew Research in 2015 found that half of Catholic Republicans did not even believe there was evidence that the earth is warming. So yes, even with denominations where the leadership acknowledges the proven facts of science, the full strength of those views fails to reach down to the parishioners. Perhaps that is why Pope Francis has spoken out so much on the matter in the past year. The bigger issue here is once you add in American Protestants, who are also climate change deniers, it is more than adequate numbers to halt any actions on the matter by the American Congress. In my country, this failure to educate our parishioners has resulted in a decades-long inability to reach political consensus on climate change. And the United States is one of the two largest producers of greenhouse gases. Saltwater incursions already occur in southern Florida, and Barrow, Alaska is literally almost underwater now. And not only are we unable to find an agreement on the cause of this, we can't seem to even find time to discuss mitigation. Migration, which was spoken about in here earlier. And time is running out. Climate change and the deterioration of our ocean's ecosystems are, if not the biggest, two of the biggest threats civilization now faces. And we desperately need for the Christian church to take a stand now on the side of humanity. Help remove the logs that have been rolled in front of us based solely upon ignorance brought upon by this deception. Make sure every person in your congregation hears and understands that you stand along with science, and your faith, as well as their own, has nothing to fear from learning more about the world around us. Not only can the truth set us free, it can also protect both the credibility of the church and honor the teachings of Christ. Perhaps the greatest impediment to the church, as well as humanity in this matter, comes from our failure to realize that the human beings that wrote these texts had no possible way to comprehend the world we now live in. In their day, they presumed that only a God could be a destroyer of worlds. They had no reference for a day when humanity could both own the ability to create life and to destroy it all so completely. How many camel bones or ice core samples before the literal view loses all credibility with all but a tiny handful of truly hardcore believers? Even within a church where the literal view is not preached, the Old Testament is still quoted and preached at the pulpit. It is rare not to find laymen who have built up very close association between these two halves. How much longer will it be before science uncovers the truth that just completely discredits these texts, and it actually drags down the real value that they offer to humanity? I myself have taken full advantage of the confession. Lord knows I've needed it. One of the most destructive forces to a human psyche is guilt. And the confessional has allowed me to leave my guilt behind and grow to become a healthier person. There are millions, perhaps billions of people that will not avail themselves of the wonders of modern psychotherapy for many reasons, not least among them a fear of change. However, many of these people are quite comfortable with allowing the teachings of Christ to offer the equivalent effect upon their lives. I do not wish to see us lose this most valuable gift and highly efficient tool. But a close association to a liberal interpretation of the Bible could bring the entire house down upon us, and in addition close the book forever on humanity. In closing, I'd like to try and mix the literal with the metaphorical so completely that hopefully they become one. Up until May of this year, I was legally blind. I literally could not see my own hand held up in front of my face. Thanks to advances in science, for the first time in well over decades, I could once again see vivid color, immense detail, and the faces of those that I love. Ladies and gentlemen, I was blind, but now I see. Thank you.